What's up, guys? Brett Appley here from DailyFanMMA.com, back with another UFC Cook Picks on the Mayo Media Network. We have UFC Vegas 86 this weekend. Jack Hermansson versus Joe Pyfer in the main event. 14 fights on the slate as of now. It's a fairly low level card, I'll be honest, but with 14 fights, I think it's going to be a fun DraftKings dynamic. There should be a lot of exciting matchups as well. As usual, I am here to give you my favorite cash game play, tournament play, salary play, and a matchup I like this week from a DraftKings perspective. Before I do, why don't you please like the video, subscribe to the channel, and comment below. Give me an underdog. It's been the theme of recent cards here. Give me an underdog. You know, who do you think's going to come through below the mid-range? We got 14 dogs. If you have a stand, if you feel comfortable with a certain underdog, I think you can definitely gain an advantage against the field this week because there's not a lot to be comfortable with. Without further ado, let's get into my cash game play of the week, though. Is going to be Devin Clark at 8.9K. Clark is minus 240 to win on the slate against Marcin Prachniow. And I mean, those of you who followed MMA for a while, Devin Clark is among the cash game options, among the cash game the top plays of this slate. It should tell you a lot about the quality of this card and the kind of the lack of safety from top to bottom, because Devin Clark is not a safe fighter. He has been finished in nearly every single one of his, I think, like 8 UFC losses. A very questionable chin. Not a fighter I feel very confident in general, but he is minus 240 on Saturday, so there's theoretical safety in that. Plus, he averages 2.35 takedowns landed per 15 minutes. And his opponent, Marcin Prachniow, you know, not only was Marcin Prachniow brutally knocked out in each of his first 3 UFC fights, but doesn't really defend takedowns very well, has given up 4 takedowns to 2 of his last 3 opponents, and defending takedowns at 54%. It seems pretty likely that Clark can have some grappling success on this card. I would project him for, 2 to 3 takedowns over 15 minutes, several minutes of control. He's good up against the cage. It's not going to be a very exciting fight, I don't think, and Clark is plus 215 to win inside the distance, plus 210, which is actually better than his usual numbers. But this isn't a fighter I project to have much finishing ability, so if you want to pivot away in tournaments, I understand. However, the top tier this week, 9K and above, it's definitely tricky. I mean, there are fighters you can target, but a lot of them are knockout or bust. Clark is only 8.9K, saves you a little bit of salary off the top end. Fairly safe to win given that minus 240 money line. A fairly safe style with wrestling equity against an opponent who doesn't defend takedowns very well. So I think Clark is a pretty decent cash game option this week. Next up, my tournament play of the week. I am going with Hyder Emil at 8.7K. This card is so tough, guys. I mean, there are plenty of knockout or bust fighters that you could choose from on this card. I'll just rattle off some of them. Okai at the top, Marcos, Prates, Rodriguez could be in that tier, Pyfer could be in that tier, Brychak could be in that tier, Ige could be. I mean, most of this card feels very knockout or bust. There's not a lot of trustworthy options. I like Emil, and I like this matchup a lot more than the market because this fight's priced at minus 180 to go the distance, in part because neither of these guys have been knocked out, in part because you look at the stats on Garcia and he's lost each of his 3 UFC fights by decision. They're just kind of slow paced. He's getting out grappled. Hyder Emil just won on the Contender Series, landed 26 strikes and a decision. They don't profile very well statistically, but I mean, if you go and watch Emil's regional tape coming from the Gilbert Melendez camp, he's pretty aggressive. Like, he's willing to brawl, willing to exchange, and he's not very defensively oriented. So I kind of view him as a guy who, I mean, yeah, he can win decisions, but like his last decision came because his opponent was aggressively wrestling him and he was forced to scramble. I have a feeling Fernie Garcia, who's primarily a boxer, is going to be willing to stand and trade with Emil. So I think there's a decent chance that someone gets hurt in this fight. We haven't seen Emil hurt often on the regional scene, but I think just because of his poor defensive technique that he probably will get knocked out at some point. Fernie Garcia has been hurt in the UFC, just doesn't produce a lot of offense, so I think it's quite possible that he gets hurt too. I like this play in tournaments because, again, the market isn't really on it. Emil's plus 265 to win inside the distance, and he's priced right below Brychek, who we'll talk about, who's 8.8K. That fight is insanely likely to end inside the distance. Pyfer's priced right above them. So I think there's going to be multiple fighters in this tier right above Emil who will draw attention. And then below you got Dan Ige who will draw some attention. Wells. It's a tricky range. So I definitely don't expect Emil to be chalk. He's arguably boom or bust, but so is a lot of this card. He's very aggressive, very willing to exchange. And I think he has a sneaky chance to win by knockout compared to his inside the distance line. So Emil will be my tournament play of the week at 8.7K. All right, moving on to my salary play of the week. A lot that, I could touch on. A lot of these fighters have kind of shots in the dark, chances to win. I like Jack Hermansson quite a bit in the main event, though I like Joe Pyfer as well. But Hermansson, I feel like, is the value side here. He's plus 210 to win. And the issue with Hermansson is that he can be breakable at times. Like, he's been knocked out early. He was knocked out early by Jared Cannonier. He was knocked out early by Thiago Santos. He was hurt really badly early by Marvin Vettori. He's been taken down, at times. And so Joe Pyfer's a good, dangerous boxer, physical guy. So I wouldn't be shocked if Pyfer just goes out there and kind of hurts Hermansson early and finishes the fight. But Hermansson is also very, very experienced. I mean, Hermansson went, after getting hurt badly by Vettori, he went a full 5 rounds. He went a full 5 rounds with Sean Strickland. And he's a pretty high-paced striker. He lands 5.1 significant strikes per minute, absorbs 3.6. He throws a lot of leg kicks, so he has consistent volume that can land. It's a high floor of production there. He also can wrestle, 1.6 takedowns landed per 15 minutes. A good submission grappler. Not really a great wrestler, though. Not a guy I expect to get a lot of top time. And so Pyfer may just be the better wrestler here, the more likely of the two to earn top time. But, we've seen Joe Pyfer on his back very, very limited amount of times. I've seen him reversed on the Contender Series. Pyfer just hasn't really faced any competition in the UFC. Amedovski doesn't mean anything to me. Gerald Meerschaert, I don't care much about that win. Abdulrazak Al-Hassan, good game plan by Pyfer, but these aren't really credible wins in 2023, 2024. So although I do think Pyfer has early finishing ability, Hermansson's a major step up in competition for him, both in terms of skill level and experience. And so on this card at 7.2K, I mean, we know that Jack Hermansson can go 5 rounds. He's gone 5 rounds multiple times where he's landed more than 100 significant strikes. He can grapple as well. Perhaps he just loses the fight and then it's more preferable to target, to scatter shot on the bottom tier, hoping for finishes. But I like Hermansson at 7.2K. I think he has more win equity than his line indicates. I think he can grapple. I think he has some finishing equity down the stretch, plus 375 inside the distance. It's not a major, I'm not majorly confident in Hermansson, but I do like him for this price. I think this is a really strong main event to target on this card, and he will be my salary play of the week. All right, finally, my matchup of the week. I referenced it before. I'm going to go with Robert Brychek versus Ihor Potieria. Brychek is 8.8K, Potieria 7.4K. Brychek a favorite, minus 145. Potieria plus 125. And I just tweeted this as well. The MMA betting markets are so inefficient because, and this is just one example of it, Brychek has the second best inside the distance, or the third best, an elite inside the distance line on this slate at minus 175. Minus 175 to win inside the distance. is indicative of a fighter who would project to be quite popular at 8.8K as a knockout artist, especially fighting an opponent in Potiera who's been knocked out in each of his last 3 losses. So I think people will scramble to play Brychek. The problem is, although he's minus 175 to win inside the distance, he's minus 145 to win the fight. So one of these numbers is not correct. And, you know, I don't know which one it is, but just be careful about inside the distance lines because, they don't mean everything. This market is very, very inefficient. If Brychek is truly minus 145, minus 155 to win, which is where most books have him, he's obviously not minus 175 to win inside the distance. A number minus 115 plus 100 would be more realistic for an inside the distance line. So I think people will get a little bit caught up in that. But still, the fight as a whole is minus 850 to end inside the distance. Potiera, like I said, has been knocked out in each of his last 3 losses. Brychek is kind of an early knockout artist. Very boom or bust, but at 8.8K, I think you need tournament exposure there. And Potiera is going to rate out well for me too, because he's the underdog in the same fight that's minus 850 to end inside the distance. He'll carry probably significant leverage against Brychek because he's lost 3 of his last 4 fights. People don't like him, but he's plus 125 to win on some books. Like, this is not a spot that the books think is, Brychek should be heavily favored, and Brychek has been knocked out on the regional scene. Potiera is plus 200 to win inside the distance at 7.4K. So kind of one of these random underdogs that I mentioned. Hard to like Potiera, just or kind of dependent on early damage. He gasses out. He's not a great wrestler, but these guys will probably stand and trade. Potiera can inflict damage, and Brychek's already been knocked out on the regional scene. So if we're getting crazy leverage against Brychek, that's only going to add to Potiera's value. This is a really good fight to target. Again, very likely to end inside the distance. Based on the prices, the winner's going to project to compete with the optimal lineup. That will be my matchup of the week. All right, guys, that's it for this UFC Quick Picks. Thank you so much for the support. You can follow me on Twitter, Appley, TTPP, dailyfanmma.com for all your DraftKings breakdowns needs. Just posted, I think, 17,000 words covering every single fight on the slate. If you're looking for in-depth breakdowns, matchup analysis, DraftKings strategy, far more than what I could ever talk about in a couple minutes on this show, please check us out, dailyfanmma.com. Doing a premium podcast later this evening, Thursday, as well. Good luck in your contest this week, guys. I know it's not the best card, but we have some really, really great cards coming up. So much more UFC to come this year. Good luck again, and we'll talk to y'all soon. Peace.